There's an old axiom in business that questions are the answer, and I think that is incredibly true. In fact, I've had the privilege of writing sales models for several organizations and companies, and in that process, you're writing the model that they're going to sell their product or service from, and then also the individual techniques that go in there. And one of the biggest areas we always spend time on is that powerful area of questioning. And if I get the opportunity to be able to role play with them in the class, but then take that role play the next step, which is to go out with them on a sales call, to watch them when they are selling. So I did this, and I've probably done over 1,000 of these, by the way, but I remember there's this one time, and I got to the appointment with this person, and we were about 40 minutes early. And so I'm like, okay, tell me a little bit about this appointment. How are you feeling? It was their first call that I was having with this particular account manager. And I could tell she was nervous because as she was talking to me, it was the tap, 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 tap of the leg the whole time she was talking. And she had all these papers in her hands. Okay, so she walking me through it, and I said, so what do you got there? She goes, well, those are my questions. So we spent a lot of time on asking good questions, what are the right questions, and so on, and having your questions prepared before you got there in the seminar. So I was really pleased to see that. And so then I said, can I look at them? So I get them, and I'm like, these are good questions. And I get the second page, good questions. I get the third page, more questions. And I get to the fourth page, more questions. And I'm like, how much time do we have? She says 30 minutes. And I'm looking, this is 4 pages of questions. And so I realized she was missing the point. She was thinking that it was about the number of questions, not the type of questions that really, really mattered. And so for dramatic effect, I took her questions and said, you know what? We're not going to use these today. And I ripped the pages in half right in front of her. And I mean, she went white. I mean, it was a scary thing to do. So it was probably a little too dramatic. But I said, get out your notebook. I'm going to give you the list of questions. We're going to redo them. She goes, okay. I go, first question, why? So she wrote that down, why? Okay, second question, tell me more about that. She goes, okay, these are good, these are good. What's the next question? I said, that's it. She said, 2 questions? I said, that's it. I have to have more than 2 questions. I said, why? And she started to explain to me why she thought she had more than 2 questions. I said, well, that's interesting, but tell me more about that, why you feel that way. Now, on the back behind me was a clock. It's about 20 minutes that we had this conversation about questions. In the entire 20 minutes, I only said, why? Tell me more about that. Nothing else. Either a version of why or tell me more about that, and nothing else the whole time. And she talked the entire time. In fact, we got off of selling and the company, and I learned about her divorce, and I learned about her life. In fact, I learned that most of her life, she had been kind of beaten down or defeated. Like she would really want to succeed, but everybody would tell her she can't. She wasn't good enough. She wasn't strong enough. She wasn't fast enough. She wasn't smart enough. All she got was this negative input. So I could see that it made sense to me. 4 pages of questions for a 30-minute meeting was her trying to overcompensate for that lack of self-confidence, from those constant voices in her head telling her she wasn't good enough. Why? Tell me more about that. And we got to all that information, right? That wasn't what I was looking for. That's what she wanted to talk about. But it really, I got to a place that I never would have gotten if I just asked basic questions. And even if I just watched her sell, I didn't understand what was going on here. But when using those 2 questions, I got there. Now that would work in a sales environment. It also works in a coaching environment. So if I had an employee that says, well, I can't do this. Why? What are you concerned about? And they start to, well, okay, well, tell me more about that. Or you have a boss who's like, well, you pitch them your idea. I don't think that's going to work on that. Well, why do you feel that way, right? Why? And tell me more about that. You know, we try to simplify things in herd mentality. That's really what we try to do. And so today I wanted to try to simplify and say, look, there's really 2 questions that you need. If you're going to do any sales call, if you're going to do any coaching conversation, if you're going to do any mentoring session, there's really just 2 questions that center everything around. The first one is why. And the second one, tell me more about that.